But Mr. Dipo, I think our time is fast spent and we're just going to wrap up now. I think I have my final questions before I also ask some of the questions that the Q&A. And I guess it's looking into the future really now. And I know that during the recent years in Lagos, for example, there have been issues about governance, looking at our real estate, right? Our buildings, and this is not even hospitality now, but looking more widely into the real estate development space and looking at governance and buildings in Lagos particularly. And building collapses signify this real governance challenge. And I think I would like your viewpoint on how best we can navigate this, because again, it's the pressure behind, you want to raise money, you want to have buildings, you want to quickly get returns. How do you, what would you say in terms of how best to manage this tension, and whose responsibility really is it for governance?
Well, if you look around in different parts of Lagos at buildings being built right now, just think to yourself, who's building it? Is he a trained builder? Does he have any documentation, proper design documentation for building it? How did he get his planning approvals? The building is a 3-4 story building in some remote area of Lagos. Who is inspecting it? Years back, we used to properly have people who were called building inspectors. I mean, a simple name, but they went round to make sure that he was using decent quality blocks. If you go down Lekki and see people manufacturing blocks, take one of the blocks, drop it from sort of waist high and let it hit the ground. It explodes into little pieces. Do you get my point? Is that the kind of material that people are using on site? In which case, who's inspecting and who's ensuring that it meets a standard? Do they know that there's a standard? Is there a standard? There are so many aspects to this. I mean, when it gets to the big buildings that we see, I mean, the one in Ikoyi, for instance, yes. Do they have an architect who's registered? Do they have a structural engineer who's registered? Is the client imposing all kinds of changes on the consultants? Are they consultants who have the kind of experience that means that they should be designing a 10, 15-story building? When a man all his life has designed little bungalows, to design a 20-story building is a bit of a departure from his norm. And that's why I said there are many aspects. I think the design, the client, his choice of consultant, he's trying to save money. His choice of contractor, he's trying to save money. His planning application, he applies for 10 floors, knowing that he wants to build 15. There are so many different things that happen in the whole linkage and the whole sequencing of these things that you really never know where to point the finger. But I think that the finger is pointed at every single aspect along the chain. I think that, yes, the planning authorities certainly have some involvement in this. I think the designers, there are people who call themselves designers and quite frankly don't have requisite training. Structural engineers, I mean, we're doing something now, basement in Victoria Island, and I'm saying, guess what? You need somebody who's got experience in building basements in VI. The Victoria Island soils are terrible. So don't go and get a guy who's been building in Ibadan, good soil, good area, and he's been building 2-story buildings, and now he comes to design, a 12-story building. Now, contracting materials. There was an argument years ago about the type of cement that even Dangote cement were producing. So these are the whole gamut of problems that we have. Is who makes these standards, who applies these standards. It's a minefield out there, quite frankly. We take on buildings that have already been built. The first thing I tell the client, we're going to have structural integrity tests, whether you like it or not. Otherwise, we don't get involved. We never know who's built it. We never know how he built it. We never know whether he changed the spec that he got approval for in the middle. We never know whether it was, it's a building approved for 3 floors, but he wants to add another 2. And I'm sure you've heard many of those ones. Um, so it's a major, major problem. I don't even think we see the problem as bad as it is, because I was on the council of ARCON, our registration council, and from some of the states, you would be shocked. These collapses are happening almost on a daily basis. Almost on a daily basis. It's astonishing. When you look at the problem nationwide, it's very, very bad. It's very, very bad. If you look at Abuja, I'm sure you drive around, you'll see buildings where, columns look like little spindles. How they're expected to carry the loading they wanted to carry is beyond me. And of course, they go 2 floors and then they stop. And it becomes an eyesore for the next 10 years. So it is a big problem. And I think that obviously after some of the collapses recently, there is a major effort now to try and at least start tackling the problems one by one. And everybody's got to be involved. The architects, the engineers, the planning groups, the contractors, the material producers, the block manufacturers. I mean, who creates and sets standards for block making? There are no standards for those guys in Lekki, none. None whatsoever. So it's a difficult problem, but I think it's that we've got to get away from this sense of cutting corners in everywhere we build. Cutting corners all the time. And I think that mentality is one that we've got to battle against. And so that gets down to education as well.